So, do you think it's helpful to know about these 8 stages? I mean, I think, one reason that we have fear of things like death is because of not knowing. Not knowing what's going to happen. So having more understanding, more knowledge about what happens when we die, what we're actually going to be going through, getting familiar with that, I think can take away some of the fear. And depending on our practice, how developed we are in our practice, then we can have more or less control over the whole situation, or at least awareness while it's happening, and then a better chance of going through that process in a better way and ending up in a better rebirth, a good rebirth in the next life. Okay, so I thought to move on to what to do to help other people who are dying. And so I'll start with what's in the booklet that you were sent beforehand, the booklet that I wrote, because that contains points for helping people who are dying, whether they're Buddhist or not. I mean, most of us, our family members and friends are not Buddhist. So, the way of helping people die, according to Buddhism, some of those points may not be suitable for somebody who's not a Buddhist, or not even interested in meditation, as you mentioned. So there's some other things that we can, learn about and work on to be of more help, benefit to others who are dying. So in the booklet, the first point I mention is working on our emotions. So if you have the booklet, it's on page 24. So this is important because people going through the process of dying themselves may experience a lot of disturbing emotions. Fear is a common one. Regret, guilt about things they did during their life. Anger. I've heard people can sometimes get very angry before they die. Why is this happening to me? The doctors didn't do the right thing. So a lot of anger can come up. And attachment, of course, that's a very common one, being attached to your family, your friends, your things, and so on. Sadness about leaving. So there can be a lot of emotions in the person who's dying. And I think that if we want to help them, it's helpful if we can learn how to manage our own emotions. Otherwise, we could be swept away, affected by their emotions. Yeah? And if we get caught up in the same emotions that they are going through, then it will be harder to help them. That makes sense? So I think this is a very helpful thing, to learn to work on our emotions. And there's a lot of tools in Buddhism. Don't have time here to go into them all, but Buddhism has a lot of tools for working on different emotions. Anger, lots of tools for working on anger and attachment and so on and so forth. And there's some tools that are kind of general, like impermanence. Impermanence, just understanding how things are subject to change. They're always changing. Things are always changing. So getting more used to impermanence is very helpful for working with emotions, because whatever it is we're getting emotional about is impermanent, right? Sometimes we just have to wait a while and then it's going to go away. And also emotions themselves are impermanent. They come and they go. I notice with myself, and this is probably true for other people as well, that when some difficult, painful emotion comes up in my mind, there's a kind of sense as if it's going to be there forever. It's never going to go away. I'm going to feel like this forever. Have you ever noticed that? Like it's a permanent state, never going to change, never going to go away. I don't think this deliberately, consciously. It's just a reaction. So when I notice that, I say to myself, no, it's not true. You know, this emotion, this state of mind, it wasn't there yesterday, it wasn't there earlier today, and later on it's going to go away. Maybe later today, tomorrow, it's not going to be there forever. So just reminding myself of that really helps to cool down that experience. Sometimes it'll go away just like that. Other times it maybe take a little bit longer, but it just makes the experience lighter, less heavy, solid, difficult. So I find that impermanence, it's not a very difficult thing to understand. It's very easy compared to emptiness. It's obvious. I mean, it's just the reality of things. So, but just getting familiar with it and reminding myself of it, especially when there are difficulties, problems, internal, external, whatever, just reminding myself, it's okay, it's not going to last, it's impermanent. It's very helpful. So that's something you could use with any disturbing emotion. Anger, sadness, despair, depression, attachment. Because Buddhism says we tend to see things as if they are permanent. We have this kind of instinctive sense of things being permanent rather than impermanent. We feel, I am permanent, my mind, my emotions are permanent, others are permanent. Things seem permanent even though they're not. They seem as if they're going to be there forever, even though they're not. It's obviously not true. So contemplating impermanence, getting used to impermanence, goes against that. And when we see things as permanent, everything seems much more solid and much more heavy. And that feeds our emotions. That sort of like puts fuel on the fire of our emotions. So remembering impermanence kind of pours water on the fire of our emotions. Really helps them to cool down. So that's my experience. I really recommend that, just getting more familiar with impermanence. And that's part of mindfulness as well. The practice of mindfulness, ideally, includes, you watch your mind, you watch your experiences, you observe what's happening with that awareness that everything is transitory. All these experiences come and go, come and go. You don't even have to do anything to get rid of them. They'll just go away by themselves if you wait long enough. Yeah? So the practice of mindfulness helps to get more experience of impermanence.
Maybe even reminding someone who's experienced loss that the person they lost, like themselves, was not here forever. Like life itself is impermanent, not just the emotion that's impermanent.
Sure. Yeah, Buddhism asks us to see everything as impermanent. Human beings, all the material things in the world around us, none of these things is going to last forever. And if we get used to the idea of impermanence and make that part of our awareness of things, it really does help when there's loss of loved ones, loss of property, loss of our own health, changes that happen as we get older and so on. So like we already thought about this before. We knew this was going to happen. So it's less of a shock when it does happen. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. But then people who don't want to think about impermanence, don't want to think about death, it's a big shock when it happens. Almost like, how could that happen? That wasn't supposed to happen. That person was supposed to be there forever. That's how, kind of crazy, isn't it, when you think about it? It's somebody was commenting on how the Queen Mother of England, like now we have Queen Elizabeth, her mother, I forget what her name was. What was her name? No, Elizabeth's mother. Oh, she was Elizabeth too? Oh, sorry. Anyway, she passed away. She was over 100. 101 or 102 or something like that. Really, really old. And she had a wonderful life, apparently. Very good life, very wonderful person, and so on and so on. So she died a number of years ago, and apparently when she died, Prince Charles said something about how he was devastated. And yes, I can understand, she was a very special person, a wonderful person. But then when you think, I mean, they must have thought about it. What did you expect? Huh? More than 100.
Especially Princess Diana, she died.
Well, that's different, because she was only, I don't know, what, in her 30s or something?
Yeah.
But 102, it really seems she will live forever.
Well, this is wishful thinking, of course. When there's somebody important, somebody wonderful, somebody we love, we want them to be there forever. But realistically, yeah, it's just not possible. Nobody can do that. So, yeah. So getting used to impermanence and death is helpful to cool down, calm down our emotions. So that's one method, general method, but there's many others. So you can find in many books methods for working with disturbing emotions. So the point I'm trying to make here is it's good to learn how to manage your emotions, your anger, your attachment, your sadness, and so on and so forth, so that you don't get overwhelmed by those emotions when you're trying to help somebody who's dying. Ideally, we want to be kind of calm, and of course we want to be loving and caring and compassionate, not like a robot, not like a machine. So we want to have warmth there, but not all emotional. Does that make sense? I mean, you've had experience with dying people, and in fact, I heard people in America, I think, who volunteer for hospice, they're advised that when they go to visit someone who's dying, they leave their baggage outside.
Physical baggage?
No. Emotional. I mean, whatever problems, whatever stuff they're dealing with, they don't bring that into, you go there for the other person and not, to bring your baggage. I mean, it's probably hard to do sometimes if you've got some really big problems going on in your life.
Deny your own emotions, though.
Huh?
I don't think you can really deny your own emotions. You still need to go through it. You just need to control over the person who you're trying to help and
Yeah.
have another outlet for it.
Yeah. I'm not talking about denying your emotions, but just trying not to let them get in the way of helping the person. I mean, if you become sad and you start crying and, falling apart, is that helpful for the person who's dying?
There's another outlet for it, or with somebody else, not a person.
Find somebody else. Yeah, and I think they do realize that, so that people who do that kind of work, and caregivers and so on, they have support groups to help them deal with their emotions. No, I'm not talking about denying or suppressing but just learning not to get overwhelmed. I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I just think that the ideal thing is to be able to stay in a calm state of mind, open and warm, loving, compassionate, but not like emotionally disturbed. Huh?
Balanced mind.
Balanced, yeah.
But sometimes it's like, I remember my last time when I visited my grandmother before she died, she was very angry. She was super angry. She was furious because she was 95, and it was, I think, the first time in her life when she realized she can't go to the bathroom by herself, and if something is broken, and the bottom where she calls the nurses is broken, and she's gonna be completely deserted, and no one is gonna, and she experienced this thing, and I was there. So I was.
She what?
She experienced the situation the first time in her life when she was completely
Helpless?
helpless, yeah.
Mm.
And she realized her body's completely failing her, and I think that this is the first time in her life that she realized that this is what's going on. And I was just there. And also she didn't hear so well, so I couldn't really, like, no matter what I told her, she didn't want to hear me, like her machine, like her hearing machine, like, I don't know how to.
Hearing aid.
Hearing
Mm.
aid.
Hearing aid. It didn't work, so no matter what I told her,
She
she
couldn't.
didn't want to hear me, and she didn't want to listen, and she was just completely in that angry position. So sometimes you just have to sit and, like, after a while, she was just, you know what, just go. She didn't want anyone to see her in this position. So sometimes there's nothing you can do,
Mm.
and it's just. It's
Yeah.
just accepting it, that you can't do anything. The person is not ready to accept their situation, and that's fine.
So did she eventually calm down, or what was this? Was there a resolution to this?
I think there was gradual deterioration in her situation, and then they moved her to a hospital, and there was like this gradual collapse of system, and then she died. But I think eventually, from what people told me, she realized that she's going to die, so she's not going to experience this helplessness anymore. And I think the dying process is what's the feeling helpless, feeling this helpless. I think this is what makes people so angry.
And frightened.
Yeah, and they feel like they are dependent on other people, and if they don't realize this before they are dying, because we are always dependent on other people, if they realize this too late, it can cause.
But I don't know if everybody goes through that. I mean, I think people might lose their abilities to do things physically, but don't necessarily get angry about that. Is that right?
Most people, I think, afraid of that stage.
Afraid, frustrated.
To be dependent,
Yeah.
you know, and not to be able to
Go to the bathroom by yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
that. Maybe also embarrassment.
yeah.
What is
A lot
it?
of people feel guilty about being a burden on their loved ones.
Yeah.
I divide it into two. If there was an outsider that can help, probably it will be completely different, as much as I understand. That's why those outsider, I mean, not family, not close family,
Like,
that can be very, very helpful.
But maybe, yeah, I don't know.
Probably because I don't want to go into
Yeah, sure.
detail, but it's very important that it's, as I say, it's different completely from relatives and staff, doctor, whatever. There, and spiritual health, of course.
So are you saying that if the person gets helped by a stranger,
Sometimes.
staff,
No, it depends
it's
very
less
much.
painful.
It's not neglected mind.
Yeah, depends on each
People get
person.
frightened, people
Yeah.
get shy because of
Embarrassing.
sometimes seeing in this situation, seeing.
But I think she was too proud to get help from anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And sometimes there are limits to what we can do. That's all.
Yeah.
We can just accept it.
I think that different people, they feel different things in
Mhm.
those situations. And for the people who are with them or take care of them, the important thing is not to do something, just to be there.
Mhm.
Just to give legitimate, it's okay, you are frightened, you are angry, understand, it's okay. It's okay to be angry, it's okay to
Yeah.
be frightened. And just to be there and to give them the opportunity to take out those feelings, it's fine. And sometimes it's enough.
Have you heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so she's one of the pioneers in the whole hospice movement, and she wrote about these different stages that people go through, although not everybody goes through all of them and in the right order and so on. But yeah, anger is one of the common stages. Denial, yeah, and grief. Bargaining, I think, is another one that she noticed, that, when people start to realize they're getting near the end, bargaining with God, if you give me another chance, I'll do better, something like that. So, it's helpful to know that these are common experiences. Actually, there's a really good book. It's on the reading list at the end of this little booklet. It's called I Don't Know What to Say, and it's written by a Canadian doctor, who'd been working in hospitals for 25 years and experienced a lot of people dying. And he discovered that some relatives and friends of a person who's dying sometimes stay away. They don't go to visit because they don't know what to say. He actually met somebody sitting in a waiting room, and this person was saying, I don't know what to say. I want to go and visit my dying relative, but I don't know what to say to them. So that's why he wrote this book, just to help us understand what it's like to be in that situation, to be diagnosed with a terminal illness and getting close to death and so on and so on. What the person is going through, and what's helpful to say to them and what's not helpful to say to them. So I found it quite a helpful book. But yeah, he talked about the different emotions that people can experience, why they experience them, and so forth. And there's one question that often comes up, and he deals with this question in his book, the question of whether or not to tell the person that they're dying. Yeah?
That's a very big question.
And he says there's a lot of discussion about that amongst people working in that field, doctors and chaplains and so on and so forth. And so there's different opinions. There's no fixed answer. But he just shared what he thinks. He thinks it is good to tell the person that they are dying so that they can prepare for it. Sometimes the preparations are practical things, making a will, telling people, saying goodbye. There's things you need to do before you go. So if the person doesn't know they're dying, then they won't do those things. And then maybe at the last minute, suddenly, I didn't do this and that. So he thinks it's better that they know. On the other hand, there are some people who don't want to know. Some people even say, I've heard this sometimes, some people say to their doctor, don't give me any bad news. I don't want to hear any bad
Okay,
news.
they say it out loud, you know, and they don't ask, then it's okay. I can tell you with my father, you know, he was on special treatment because something new. He had pancreas cancer. And after a while, the doctor said, okay, no more hope, it's not working. We're going to take him off that medicine because it's expensive and, you know. And I was the one who had to tell him that, and it meant telling him, okay, father, you're about to die, it's not working. So I told him, you know what, your body is really weak now, so we're taking you off this medication. And he looked at me and he said, okay, what does it mean? And I said, it means that you're no longer on this medication. So, you know, he had the guts to ask me, does that mean that I'm going to die? So I told him, yeah, you're gonna die. So his next question was, did they say when? And I said, no, it's up to you. And you know, I was so, I cannot lie. Under any circumstance, I had a very big problems with lying in any, you know, when others lie to me, and for me to lie, for me it's not an option. So I told the truth. I felt like crap. But then, after he asked the second question, and I was able to give him hope and say it's up to you, which was true, they didn't tell me when he would die. Because I didn't know.
Well, they don't know.
I didn't
No, they don't know.
how much longer he...
Yeah.
But he knew he was about to die.
Yeah.
And he knew it. And you know what? After that, he had recorded a video with his will. He asked me to invite some friends he didn't see for about 10 years. He made peace with his sister. They didn't talk for 20 years.
No.
If he wouldn't know that he was going to die, he wouldn't have asked me to do all
But I
that.
think this time most people can know if they want. I mean,
Sorry?
first when you have any physical problem, you go to Google and you want to see what's your situation.
If you want to,
Yeah.
it's up
More
to
and
you.
more and more people cannot. I mean, it's not like many years ago that only the doctors knew. You know, you always. Most people, they take part of all the decisions in the.
Yeah, you're right, but still there are some people who don't want to know. I have a really fresh example of a friend of mine who died half a year ago, and she said it out loud. It was there, she was going to die, we all knew it. But she wanted to go to Italy, to France, to Spain, to go, you know, and she said she was doing it because she wants to, speak, to be able to do it before she dies. But she didn't want anyone, including her daughters, to talk to her about the fact that she's about to die.
But she did know it.
She knew,
She knew it.
but
Yeah.
it was a taboo. You
Yeah.
could not talk to her about her death.
Yeah.
That was her decision.
Well, that's okay.
A lot of people don't want to experience, I say rachamim, like people,
Pity.
pity.
Mm.
Pity from people,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is not
Just-
pleasant.
Be normal. Just do things normally.
But it is normal to die.
Well, I guess what I mean,
It can be very painful.
It's not, it's impossible not to, right?
I know, but if people know that you have terminal cancer, they're going to treat you in a different way. They're going to act in a different way. So she didn't want that. She just let's just be like normal.
No, it was really, it was pretending, and she said, let's pretend. She wasn't ready to, until the minute she died, by the way.
So you think there was a kind of denial there, some denial. Mm.
Sometimes people give you advice and you don't want to hear advices now.
Exactly.
You prefer to have your
That's
own
what
experience.
Alona said, yeah, you don't always have to.
Mm.
And sometimes doctors make mistakes.
Maybe
Or they just discover some new medicine, like Moshe was telling the story of somebody who was on hospice, and then they found a medicine that cured him. So he got out of hospice.
that's nice.
So yeah, we never know what's going to happen.
But I think I don't necessarily the most important thing presence. Just be there. And sometimes it's more than enough. Just
Yeah.
to be there with him, with her.
Yeah.
It's very, very important.
But that must be really hard sometimes, because a person might be going through difficult emotions, or sometimes they're depressed, or they don't want to talk. You still have
And
to,
sometimes they don't want to see him.
yeah.
That's also
So if they don't want to see anybody, then you leave. Yeah. You have to be very flexible.
I had a couple of experiences also. My mother died when I was 15. My husband died when my kids were 12 and 8. And when I was 15, nobody talked about death. So I had absolutely no closure. My mother wouldn't discuss it. She was in denial. So when my husband was dying, I didn't want that for my kids. So I got him to go to a therapist through Teleshomel to accept it so that we could talk to the children who were 12 and 8. Because I can't tell an 8-year-old, your father's dying, but don't talk to him about it. So we went through that process and had an extremely difficult conversation with the kids. But all along, I managed his whole process. And at one point he said to me, he knew he was dying, didn't know when, didn't ask. But at one point we went around, he said to me, I'm going to ask a question I don't know if I want the answer to. And he wasn't allowed to drive anymore because the cancer had spread to his brain. And he said to me, do you know more than I do? And I didn't know how to respond. And I just turned to him and smiled because I didn't know what to do. And there's from the anxiety. And he just said to me, that's okay, that's what I thought. And that was it. And as it got closer, when you're talking about the not being able to use the bathroom by yourself, I was preparing everything. So one day I came home with the adult diapers and hid them. And I didn't think he saw me. 2 weeks later, he passed away.
Yeah.
And when we went to the hospital that time, he said to me, I'm not coming home.
Yeah.
So he had come to, like, he recognized it. And I always thought that there was some connection with bringing the adult diapers home.
Yeah, it is true, because my grandmother wanted to die before it happened. She wanted to die so bad before that step when she couldn't help herself. She was always so independent. She couldn't not take care of other people. She couldn't be taken care of. She wanted to die before them, and just seeing her struggle to be taken care of it was unbearable for her. So I honestly don't know what is more spiritually important for a person, to get what he wants before he died, or just to...
Well, he had gotten closure and we had conversations. Everyone in the family came, and I also brought the children for the last conversation with him. He told them to say what they wanted to say. He spoke, and that was like the very last time that he gathered all his energy and spoke to them as if he was fine. It was unbelievable. And then after he said goodbye to them, he basically lost consciousness at the end, towards the end. But it was beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, he was in control. You helped him be in control. It's wonderful. You know, you gave him the opportunity to do it right. Because losing control is frightening.
I don't know how much he controlled and how much I controlled.
No, but closure is important. Being there is important. Death sucks. That's what I can say.
Yeah, it's better if the person
I don't
feels
know
like
if
it's
death
the time,
sucks.
it's the time.
The person suffer in the end, and I think about my father, how he suffered before dying. I think death was like, please come over.
Merciful.
Merciful, yeah.
Yeah. Some people look forward to it. we
I mean, when you think about it, you know, our body's getting older every minute, every second, every day. I mean, if we want to be immortal, okay, we'd like, if we had a 20-year-old body forever, great. But if you have an 80-year-old body, a 90-year-old body, 100, you want that body to go on forever.
The process of dying is
Yeah, we think aging starts at 50, but it really starts the second
the
you are
second that
born.
you're
That's what Buddhism says, yeah.
Yeah.
Right after we're born, we start to age. Yeah. So, I don't know, do you want to, I mean, do we continue till 3 today? Or do you want to go later, or stop earlier? I have a lot more material I could go through. You don't mind? I mean, I'm happy to stop at 3 if that's, and you can go enjoy the sunshine the last few hours. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I've been struggling whether to ask it, because it's kind of a digression a little bit, but now when Tal said death sucks, that's exactly my question. Like, if we are aware of emptiness / dependent arising, and impermanence, and rebirth, and the possibility of better rebirth, and so, but we don't, because none of us really wants to die, and we all suffer when someone else dies. So it's like, so maybe death isn't so bad, or maybe life isn't so bad.
No, it is.
live and die the same way. Live your life and die the same way. Is that not the purpose? I mean, you practice during life to be prepared to your death. So, and it has applications. I mean, you practice well, then your death will be more beneficial. So it's together. There's no separation. Live, then die. Well, you know, it's the same, actually.
It's
the
not.
same thing.
It's not that death or life sucks. It's the choice. It's not having a choice that sucks. It's not having a choice on your circumstances that sucks. That's the point, I think.
Yeah, I think Buddhism would say it's life under the control of karma and delusions. When it's afflictions, ignorance, greed, hatred, and karma, if those rule us, if they are in charge, we are helplessly caught up in them, controlled by them, that's what sucks. That's what sucks. It's not life.
When we're
Huh?
attached. When we're
Well, attachment is one of the...
We're attached to living.
we're attached to the house, the car, the kids, the whatever, then we want to live, right?
The body.
Well, I mean, somebody following the Buddhist path would try to reduce their attachment to the material things and the sensory pleasures, and see life, like the purpose of life isn't just to build up a lot of possessions and enjoy yourself, but to develop your potential, to benefit others, to do things that are really meaningful. I mean, you can still have your car and your house and all of these kind of things, but to try to have more meaning in your life than just that. Do beneficial things, helpful things, help others, help the world, develop your own mind, develop your Buddha potential. So that, living in that way, is much more satisfactory, satisfying, both now and also long term. The results of such a life will be much better in the future. Whereas if you only live in a very materialistic way, capitalistic way, trying to accumulate as much as you can, enjoy as much as you can, it's kind of a meaningless life, according to Buddhism. And at the time of death, you probably feel, that sucked. Yeah, that's when it sucks. You spend all that time building up this stuff, and then you have to leave it all behind, and you can't even go to the bathroom by yourself, and so That's what's unpleasant. That's what's kind of meaningless. But if you have something meaningful in your life, more than just the material and sensory experiences, then, I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense. You look unsure.
I understand what you mean, but the more meaningful you're making your life, the more chaval, the more it's a pity that you're losing it, because you're doing such meaningful, important, helpful.
But then we can carry on in the next life. Keep doing the same. This is what a Buddhist would think. Okay, this body's gotten a bit old now. I can't do so much anymore. So it's time to trade it in, get a new model, and continue next life. I want to continue. That's what I hope. That's what I pray. I want to be born in a situation where I can continue to practice Dharma, develop my mind, make my life beneficial for others, keep working towards enlightenment. So that's what I aspire for the future, for the next life. And I'm sure, this is what Buddhist practitioners, of course, those who want to attain liberation, they just want to stop being born altogether. But those on the Bodhisattva path want to keep going for the benefit of everyone, for the benefit of the world. Okay, the next point in helping others is, I mentioned this earlier, giving hope and finding forgiveness. And this comes from Sogyo Rinpoche's book, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. Because sometimes when people come to the end of their life, they may feel guilt, regret, depression, hopelessness. And if that's the case, then it's good to try to talk to them in such a way that it says, first allow them to express their feelings, let them talk about these things, don't tell them to shut up. Listen compassionately and non-judgmentally, but also try to encourage them to remember the positive things that they've done. Everybody's done good things. Nobody's totally bad. So help them remember positive things that they've done, feel good about the way they live their life. And if they believe in God or they believe in Buddha, talk to them about forgiveness, that no matter what they've done, they will be forgiven. There's forgiveness available. Of course, it's good for them to feel regret, to feel sad for what they've done, but sometimes people feel, oh, I'm so bad, I've done such horrible things, nobody would ever forgive me, I'm unforgivable. So encourage them to not feel that way and instead to feel there's hope for you. So that's just a brief mention of that point. In his book, he says, all religions stress the power of forgiveness, and this power is never more necessary nor more deeply felt than when someone is dying. Through forgiving and being forgiven, we purify ourselves of the darkness of what we have done and prepare ourselves more completely for the journey through death. So all we can do is try to help the person, but another thing we need to realize is that we can't change somebody else's mind. Even a Buddha couldn't do that. So if a person gets stuck in some negative state of mind, like anger or guilt or whatever, and we try to listen and talk to them and help them get out of that state of mind, but if it doesn't work, when the person doesn't get out of that state of mind, we just have to accept that we've done the best we can. We can't go into their mind and, fix it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, if we practice on our own, there may be some practices we could do, like Tonglen. Tonglen practice could be very helpful. That's when you Imagine taking away the person's suffering.
Helpful for the patient?
Could be. It could
for
be.
ourselves?
Well, it's for both. I mean, we do Tonglen to help decrease our self-centeredness, but it's also possible that it could help other people. I read about a woman who would practice Tonglen during business meetings at her office. Sometimes the atmosphere would get kind of like that. And so she'd just sit there quietly, covertly, doing Tonglen, taking in the negative energy, sending out positive energy, and it helped. It did change the atmosphere, and even some of the colleagues noticed it and, you know, commented, yeah, when you come to the meetings, they go much better. So that shows that it can have an effect on others. I mean, there's no guarantee, of course. It's not absolutely definite, but it's worth a try. And at least you're doing something instead of just sitting there and feeling kind of helpless. Because that's easy to happen, you know, like with your grandmother. Watching your grandmother getting so upset, so angry, you probably felt kind of helpless yourself. You didn't, you know, didn't want her to be in that state, but couldn't get through to her. So if you, you know, if you do Tonglen in situations like that, it might help. It's possible. It's done with compassion. It's done with love. And I mean, I think there is some possibility about energy changing when you do this kind of practice. It can change. Praying to Tara, praying to Buddha. That's also helpful. I find it helpful. When I feel helpless, I don't know what to do. I can't manage the situation. I pray to the Buddha, please, can you come and, you know, try to help the situation, make things better. So, then if the person is a Buddhist, it's possible, you might be with someone who's a Buddhist, then try to find out what they already know, what they understand, what kind of practices they're familiar with, and then talk to them or do those practices with them. I was once helping a woman who, in Singapore, who was dying, and she had a lot of faith in Kuan Yin. Did you get those pictures?
You want me to send it to...
If you want, yeah. So when I went to, I would go to visit her, and I would just lead her in a Kuan Yin meditation. Yeah? Meditate on Kuan Yin, recite Om Mani Padme Hum. Sometimes it's spelled with a K, K-W-A-N. Sometimes it's spelled G-U-A-N, Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin. Anyway, it's a Chinese version of Chenrezig Avalokiteshvara. So when I would go and visit the woman, we would just do Kuan Yin practice together, or if the person knows mindfulness, lead them in a mindfulness meditation. So go according to what they are familiar with and comfortable with. Talk to them about, talk to them about Buddha's teachings, the Four Noble Truths, ethics, and so on and so forth. So anyway, just be sensitive to the person and what they know, what they're familiar with, what they're comfortable with, and talk to them in that way, and do practices with them. And you can also do practices for them, because if they are very, very sick and they're not able to do practices, you can do for them. You can imagine, for example, a Buddha above their head, light coming, filling them, purifying them, blessing them, and so on and so forth. Then if the person is not a Buddhist, which is probably the case for most of us, our family, friends, Again, try to understand if they do have any religious beliefs, if they believe in God or Allah or Brahma or whatever. So if they do have religious beliefs, then talk to them in that way, in that kind of language. And again, encourage them to have faith and feel everything's going to be okay. God forgives you for whatever you've done. Pray to God and so on. So just talk according to what's suitable for them. And it's never appropriate to try to change their views. That's, you know, like I'm a Buddhist, but I'm not going to try to convert my mother to Buddhism. So, she's a Catholic, and that's good for her. So respect the beliefs and practices of others, and encourage them. Give them encouragement to have faith in their beliefs and their practices and so on. And if the person is not any religion, they're an atheist, don't have any beliefs, then you could still talk to them, you know, maybe share some concepts that we have, but without using terminology, Buddhist terminology. For example, if the person is feeling angry, you know, you could try to help them to cool down their anger without using Buddhist terminology. Just try to help them see that, oh, it's not a very nice state of mind. You're not happy when you're angry, so maybe it would be good to, you know, try not to be angry and give them some tools to not be angry. So that's just a suggestion. But of course the person has to be open to it. You can't force them. But if there is an opening there, if there is some interest there in learning ways of thinking, seeing things differently that, you know, you could share with them, then you could try to do that. And again, you could do your own practices. Visualizing Buddha, imagining light silently, not out loud. It might irritate the person, but you could, you know, quietly do these practices, or the Tonglen practice. They don't have to know that you're doing these practices. You can do them on their behalf. So this is just general advice, like how, as a, you know, if we are spiritual practitioners ourselves, how we could help someone dying in a spiritual way. Spiritual things we could do. And of course there's lots of other things as well, the more practical things. If they're thirsty and they can't pick up a glass of water, holding it for them. If they need the nurse to be called, go and do that. So just be there and be ready to help them in whatever you can, whatever way you can, whatever way is needed for them. So this is all very, very general. But like I say, there's a couple of very good books with more material, more practical, not so much spiritual information, like the one I mentioned earlier, Advice for Future Corpses. That's a new one. And the other one I mentioned in the book, Facing Death and Finding Hope. I think that was published back in the 90s sometime, so it's been around a long time, but I think it's still very, very beautiful. There's many other books as well on death and dying and how to help people who are dying. Do you know any others, Moshe, that you could recommend? Books?
No one in Hebrew translation of Stephen Levine.
Yeah, we were talking about this.
Hebrew translation of what? Oh, Stephen Levine, yeah.
And it's called Mimet, right?
Who Dies? Yeah, Who Dies, yeah. He's written a number of books, but Who Dies
but
is...
this one is translated to Hebrew.
Yeah, that's just the...
Kubler-Ross is also translated.
Hmm.
Very good.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
There's also Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book.
Wholesome Fear? That one?
No, it's how to prepare. I
And
can't
help
remember.
your dear ones.
Yes.
Enjoy
I
the-
have
So
it.
we translated to Hebrew.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there
Huh?
is a
Mary?
one.
No, it's another one.
No,
We
how to-
translated the ultimate.
Ultimate healing.
But that's
Talking about that too.
no, but it's a
Yes,
specific
about-
book
yeah.
about that.
Only about that. It was a book only.
I have the PDF.
Yeah.
I can send it to you.
Yeah.
Actually, you can,
FPMT, yeah.
yeah, this one. You can download it, this one here.
How to help your loved ones enjoy death
Yeah.
and go happily to their next rebirth.
Yeah.
I
So
know, I
you can
was-
download this.
I
It's
thought
huge. It's 400 pages. And I met Rabina, it was Rabina, Venerable Rabina, who edited this book. But she said that this is the first one that she did. It's a PDF. And then they published it by Wisdom Publications. Quite beautiful, with gold on the edges of the paper. But she said she wasn't happy with what they did. Somebody edited it further. She didn't like what they did. So now she's redoing it. And so it's probably better to download this one. This is her original work. And wait for the new one to come out by Wisdom. But yeah, this paper that I passed out, that you have copies of, yeah, the next section, it says, how to help the dying and the deceased, some advice from Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And in brackets it says, note, practices marked with a star can be found in How to Help Your Loved Ones Enjoy Death and Go Happily to the Next Rebirth, that book. It's a free PDF that can be downloaded from fpmt.org/death. So that's the place where you can download. And there's lots of other things as well on there, other materials that you can get.
And they're free.
And it's free, yeah. Free things. So maybe we can just quickly go through. This is Lama Zopa Rinpoche's advice on helping people who die. And so general advice, help the person have a positive state of mind. That's the main thing, the bottom line. Whoever they are, whether they're Buddhist or Hindu or Jehovah's Witness or whatever, try to help them have a positive state of mind. But I say try because there's no guarantee that we will be able to do that. We may not be successful, but at least we try. Because it's really up to them if they're going to be in a positive state of mind or not. So, and then teach them practices according to their ability. For example, meditations on loving kindness, compassion, Tonglen, visualizing Buddha, the clear nature of the mind, and so on. So if the person is open, you can teach them these practices, guide them in doing these practices, so that can be very helpful. And the second point, create a pleasant, peaceful, holy environment in their room. So the environment will have an effect on their mind, so try to make it beautiful, with nice flowers, beautiful pictures, and if they're Buddhist, you can put images of the Buddhas and their spiritual teachers, holy objects like stupas and so on, mantras. In fact, Rinpoche designed this card. I don't know where you can get it from. Maybe you can download it. And it has a number of images, Dalai Lama, different Buddhas. It has some mantras. Some of these mantras or syllables, it said that just by seeing them, will purify a lot of negative karma. So if you have that card, you could put that next to the person so they can see it. But then, of course, if the person's not a Buddhist, maybe they're anti-Buddhist, then better to put other objects that would help them feel calm and peaceful and positive. And then next point, we recite prayers and mantras to leave imprints on their consciousness that will help them encounter the spiritual path in future lives and eventually attain enlightenment. So Rinpoche really collects all these different mantras and prayers that are very helpful for someone who's dying. And so we can recite those in the ear of the person if they are open. I don't think it would be right to force somebody to listen to something if they don't want to hear that. But sometimes, even if they're not Buddhist, some people are agreeable to listen to mantras. Sometimes they're just desperate. Anything, anything that can help me. In America, I heard there's certain music that, I don't know if it's been composed newly or if it's traditional music, but certain music that is played for people who are dying. Have you heard of that, Lona? No?
I know of certain music, but sometimes when I know that someone loves music or a kind of music, I can play it for you. It can be classical music or just a song, but if the person loves this music, I think it's good.
Yeah, I think the idea is that this type of music just has a very soothing, relaxing effect on people, so it can be helpful for them as they are dying. Okay, then as the person is dying, what you can do is learn these 8 stages so you can recognize them as they are occurring. And then practices to do. Rinpoche says medicine Buddha is the best practice before they're dying, while they're dying, and after death. So he really recommends the medicine Buddha practice. So you translated the book Ultimate Healing into Hebrew?
Yeah,
so there's a lot of, so there's information in there about medicine Buddha practice and mantra and so on. So that's very good. Also reciting the names of the 35 Buddhas. 35 Buddhas, yeah, reciting their names is good. And yeah, anyway, it's easy to find those practices, and they're all in that book, that free PDF. and then anyway, there's a long list here of different practices: medicine Buddha, Chenrezig, Om Mani Padme Hum, 5 great mantras, which you can also find in that book. Zung of the exalted, completely pure, stainless light. Mantra taught by Buddha, Drodin Gyalwa Chö. Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava here. So those are especially good. And then for pain, if a person is in pain, there's this sutra, Noble Sutra on Entering the Great City of Vaishali, which is also in that book. So you could recite that. I think it's pretty short. And there's also this mantra to not have pain at the time of death. So if you can get the person to recite that. We can also recite it. I do that every day a couple of times. Om, I haven't had the transmission, but I think it's Om Shavade Vara Bisa Line Soha. So if we recite that mantra, it's supposed to prevent pain at the time of death, which would be very useful. Then he says, place a stupa containing the 4 Dharmakaya relic mantras on the person's chest, or ask them to hold it. Actually, the FPMT has a kit, or they used to. I don't know if they still do. You can order it from the FPMT store. It's a kit containing a lot of these things. It's like a little kit for somebody, for somebody dying, yeah. So it has this stupa, and the next point is a paper containing these 10 powerful mantras. And you can put that on the person's chest or heart, face down. You can leave that there. And then when they get close to death, you can put a POA pill. Not easy to get a POA pill, but there's probably one in that kit. So a POA pill is made by lamas. I'm not sure exactly what they put in them. But well, POA is the word, it means transference, and it's actually a kind of practice. POA, have you heard of POA?
I heard, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's a practice that one can train in during one's life, and the idea is at the time of death. POA means transferring. So the idea is transferring your mind, going out of the top of your head, going to a pure land.
Because if it goes out of the crown, then it's more likely that you'll be reborn as a human.
Or in a pure land. Yeah, that's the idea.
I was lucky to be in the Ligong monastery in Tibet in the time of the Torah. And I also took a video of this Torah. There were two dead bodies. Well, they put in boxing. And I took a very, I hope, sensitive video of this. And it's on YouTube. But anyway, the Torah, it was in the evening. They do it, what they did, I don't know usually what they do. It was near the sunset, near the sun, yeah, the sunset.
What's the name of the monastery?
Dvigong.
Zigong.
Dvigong, with a D.
Z.
D.
Digong.
Dvigong.
Z. Digong. D-R-I?
K.
Oh, Drikung. Drikung.
Yeah.
Drikung Monastery. Okay.
אתה יכול לשלוח לנו קישור ליוטיוב?
כן.
מעניין אותי גם לראות.
And next day there was, of course, the sky there, and I didn't tell you. But what was interesting is that the families, I was very excited to be in this ceremony, and the families with small children just sat there and were laughing, and you know, and there was a relative, and completely different what we know about burial, what ceremony and so on. It was very, very, you know, kind of dissonance from our point, not being judging it, but from me it was so strange to see it.
I heard in Korea when somebody dies, people wear white rather than black. They wear white. And it's like a celebration. They have like a celebration. It's a celebration of the person's life rather than mourning and black and sad.
The Irish do the same.
The Jeeps.
They have a way to celebrate the dead person's life. They get drunk, they sing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more...
White is in the morning color also in India or in China also. In India, people wear white when somebody has different.
Yeah, but I guess the atmosphere
is
different. It's not heavy and dark and sad and ooh, yeah.
But what if someone that is close to you asks you to arrange a celebration when they die, like how, and it's not culturally appropriate, like how would you react?
Well, I heard, one time I was in New Zealand and these people, this couple, they had a child, 15-year-old child, who, I think he had brain cancer. And he died, and before he died, I'm not sure how much beforehand, he actually, one day he said to his father, he named the date that he was going to die. He said, I'm going to die on that day. And then he started giving instructions on what he wanted for his funeral. He didn't want people to be sad and crying. He wanted it to be joyful and a party and nice food and nice music. So they did. I mean, you know, that's what he asked for. They're not going to go against that. I mean, of course, it was very sad for especially for the parents, you know, to lose a child. But he was very specific, very clear. how he wanted his funeral. And the interesting thing is, the father said the date that he was a rugby fan, and the date of his death was just after a really big rugby match. So it's like he was waiting for that match, and okay, then I can go. But interesting that he had that knowledge of when it was going to happen, and he seemed to be pretty clear, ready to go. In fact, I've heard children are often more accepting of death than adults. I met a woman whose 17-year-old daughter died of leukemia. And before she died, she said to her mother, "I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. You don't have to worry about me, but I'm worried about you. This is going to be really hard for you." And it was. But quite amazing. 17-year-old girl talking to her, 40-something-year-old mother, She was fine, but easier for her than for the mother. So, anyway. Then, stupa. You can also, so we were talking about poa pill. Yeah, so a poa pill is made of blessed substances and probably blessed with mantras and so on. So I have some poa pills I managed to get when I was in India, and so you put it on the crown of the person while they're dying, and it's supposed to help consciousness to go out from the top of the head and go to a good place. And you can take it off afterwards and reuse it. You don't have to leave it.
If you don't do it, so where does the consciousness go out?
Well, where it goes out depends on their karma. But one thing they do say is, after the person has passed away, it's good if you can to just leave the body undisturbed as long as possible. And then when they do, before it's taken away to the, what do you call it? Freezer or the funeral parlor or whatever, you can pull the hair, if they have any hair. You can pull their hair here just to stimulate that place. And if they don't have any hair, just rub it. Just stimulate that part of the body to encourage the consciousness to go out. Because then after that, people will start touching the body in other places. So this will help consciousness to go out the crown and go to a better place. And you can also put a stupa, if you have a stupa, on the crown. And then it says, refrain from crying in the presence of the person, before they die, during death, and so on, because it might disturb their mind. So just try to keep the atmosphere peaceful. You could have mantras playing, if you have CDs of mantras and prayers and so on. Then after death, after the breath is stopped, do Medicine Buddha. And anyway, there's these other prayers. I won't go through all of them. And if you're not into doing a lot of prayers and mantras, that's okay. You can just do one. You can just do Medicine Buddha or Chenrezig. You don't have to do many, many, many. But Rinpoche just recommends all of these. I remember one woman in Singapore, her father was dying and she just wanted so much to do something for her father. So she got one of these books of all these practices that Rinpoche recommended, a big book like this, and she just did everything, everything in the book, which is quite beautiful. I mean, it was her wish, But I'm just saying you don't have to if you don't feel comfortable. It's enough just to do some. And also you can ask a lama to do a poa practice, if you know a lama. I don't know if Kopan does that. Kopan Monastery in Nepal, they will sometimes do pujas. If you ask them to do a puja for somebody who's passed away, they will do that. But whether they do poa, I'm not sure. But there are sometimes lamas who are around and they know how to do poa, so you could request that. And then try to avoid touching the body until they say there are signs indicating when the consciousness has left the body. So there should be some liquid coming out of the nostril or out of the sexual organ. That is something that happens once the consciousness has left the body. Also at the heart, there'll still be some warmth at the heart if the mind is still in the body. So if there's still warmth there, then that means the mind is still inside. And also the smell. Bodies normally start to smell when the person's died, but they don't start to smell as long as the consciousness is still inside. So if there's still some freshness and no bad smell, that could also be a sign that the consciousness is still present. So it's good if you can to just leave the body undisturbed until these signs occur. But of course, if the person's in the hospital or if there's some...
Right, it's impossible.
Huh?
It's impossible because we just said, if the person in the hospital, dying in the hospital, and we said it can take weeks.
What can take weeks?
No, not weeks.
The mind to get out of the body.
Oh, that's only a lama. Ordinary people, they say the maximum would be 2-3 days.
Even 2-3 days.
Yeah, I know. A hospital. I mean, in Singapore, they do allow bodies to stay in the hospital, but in the West, it's more tricky. But if the person dies at home, that's another benefit of having death happen at home. Then you can have more control over it.
I was thinking about my own death. Who's going to take care of all this stuff that you just read? Who's going to do it for me?
Maybe you left.
Are you? I'm going to put you in my will.
You left early. No, but there's something called a Dharma will. You can make out a Dharma will. And in the Dharma will, there's a form. I'll send it to you, and you can specify what practices you want to be done before you die, while you're dying, after you die, who you want to be notified, my lama, da-da-da. So the Dharma, what you want done with your body, cremated, buried, whatever. So the Dharma will. So if your family members are not able or willing to do practices, you could ask them in your Dharma will. You can say, please notify Shantideva study group to come and do prayers for me. Notify Kopan Monastery, notify Lama Zopa Rinpoche to do prayers. So they'll respect that for sure. They'll do what you ask for. So that's a really good idea. A Dharma will. You're a Dharma practitioner. Huh?
I said, wow, you have so many things that you have to send me now to distribute.
You have to remind me.
I all of them because I didn't write it down.
So yesterday I was talking, the pain thing, the Dharma will. That's it.
The pictures I will send.
I sent the pictures, yeah.
And there was another thing.
Video.
Video.
Yeah,
it's from Moshe. Okay, so.
She will probably.
So we don't have time to go through all of this, but you can do it on your own. And yeah, it's mainly practices, Buddhist practices for a person who's died, who's Buddhist. But again, some of these things you can do. Like my mother wasn't a Buddhist, she was a Catholic, but I still did Buddhist practices for her. I didn't think that was harmful. And I asked Rinpoche to do practices for her. So, yeah. Anyway, so we've come to the end of our time. Yeah, so anyway, it also says, even you can continue doing these practices up, 49 days or more if you want to, a year or 2 years. But the 49-day period is good because that's the time in which the person might still be in the bardo. And it's said that if you do practices and you dedicate prayers and merits and so forth, it might affect their rebirth. And you can also, if you have access, if it's a relative and you have access to their money, you can use some of their money to create merit, like making donations, making offerings, liberating animals. Those are things you can do, and dedicate the merit to the person. So it's like you're doing those practices on their behalf, creating merit on their behalf, and that's giving a possibility for them to have a better rebirth next time. Yeah, and there's also, it says, one of the points is you can request prayers for the deceased to be done by His Holiness the Dalai Lama by making a small donation, and then there's the link where you can do that. So they have, I think they have a list of people who've passed away. I don't know if his Dalai Lama actually reads all these names, but maybe he just has it there on his altar and he just dedicates his merit for all of those people. So that's a really nice thing to do for a loved one. Okay, so we've looked at quite a few things that can be done, both for ourselves to prepare for death and
I want to ask
helping.
a small question
Yeah.
about the Torah practice. Is it a practice that only lamas do, or is it something that we can learn and do also?
Yeah, you can learn. You need to receive an initiation.
Initiation from a lama.
And there's different Poa practices. Probably the most common, popular one is with Amitabha Buddha, Amitabha Poa. And there's one famous Lama, I think his name is Ayang Rinpoche. And I think every year in Bodh he teaches, gives this teaching, and then they do a kind of like retreat. But I think he must come to the West, because somebody told me.
What's the name?
Ayang, Ayang, Ayang Rinpoche. Ayang Rinpoche. It's a Nyingma. Nyingma Nama. Ayang, Ayang. But somebody told me she got teachings in Paris. He was in Paris teaching this. So maybe there's... Anyway, you might look it up on the internet and see if he's very famous for Poa teachings, Poa practice.
And he's getting old right now, so it's...
But he's not the only one. I mean, there's others. There's others. If you want, that's his specialty. Did you attend the teaching?
Yeah.
How
So
long?
every year he has in January. It was for 10 days, I think. I think it was 10 days.
Yeah, I never attended, but I sometimes would, in the evening, the whole group of people would be walking around the stupa, chanting this prayer for Amitabha. Quite beautiful, quite moving. There's also this woman, she's an American, and she was married to a Nyingma Lama named Choktu Toku, who passed away. And apparently she's quite an accomplished practitioner of Poa, and she teaches that as well.
Okay.
Well, it's similar to my name, actually. I think Khadro, something Khadro. Because when I was in Portugal a few months ago, they told me she was in Portugal at the same time teaching. And
Maybe Khadro or
Nyingma, yeah. And
Also, Kid Dharma is teaching Dzogchen, which I assume, I don't know for sure. It's kind of the same, I don't know really.
Dzogchen?
Dzogchen, yeah, Kid Dharma. He's teaching Poa. In fact, I attended his retreat. It was 5 days, 5 days. He was in Israel, but now he's, I assume, too old also to
What's
come
his
here.
name?
Keith Dauman.
Keith
Dauman.
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 He's written some books or translated some books. I've heard the name.
His retreat in Israel was poor.
Poa. Oh, okay. So there was Poa right here in Israel.
Right here, but it was 8 years ago.
Ah. So there might be opportunities here.
But I see now that Ayan Rinpoche is starting Poa retreat in 2 days. If somebody wants, good guy. I'm good guy.
Jump on it.
January. 10 days.
So 2 flights a day, basically.
Mashma?
Ayan.
How old is he? Do you know?
I
80s?
maybe.
Yeah.
Why?
But there are other teachers, so it's not that once he's gone, there's no more chance. But yeah. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Learned something useful. So let's do some dedication prayers.